What's up, guys? If you saw the last video, you'll know that we finally got the 2JZ E36 to a drift event, and we broke a whole bunch of stuff. We found some issues. There's a lot of things to fix. So the main thing is going to be throttle body. I'm hoping this will fix the issue with the car shutting off at high RPM, because I've tried all kinds of things to try to fix the issue, and so far nothing has worked. So it seems like it's got to be something to do with the ECU. And the only thing that we don't have that the ECU is looking for is the electronic throttle body and a map sensor. So I'm going to start with the throttle body and see if that makes a difference. I also might try relocating the knock sensors to see if we're getting knock, and maybe if I move them to a different part of the block, that will get rid of some of the knock. But throttle body is going to be priority number one. It's definitely not going to be a fun project. This throttle body is pretty big. I got this off an LS400. So to stick it on here like that, it's going to stick out quite a bit further than my original throttle body, and I'll have to redo all the intercooler piping. I want to try to avoid cutting the intake and having to re-weld a different bracket onto it for the throttle body to bolt on. So I'm going to try to make some sort of adapter plate that I can bolt on and then bolt the throttle body to that, or just drill the intake if it'll fit and try to get it to seal. And then we'll probably just do some temporary intercooler piping with couplers, just so that we can test drive it and see if that fixed the issue. And then one other thing we're gonna do while we have the throttle body off is replace the high pressure power steering line. I just built one out of AN stuff and it blew off on the track because it wasn't built for the high pressure. So Excessive Manufacturing, which is the same company that made my engine and transmission mounts, they make a power steering line that is for a 2JZ in a BMW. So it's got adapters and everything, so we can just run it straight from the 2JZ pump to the BMW power steering rack. So that should take 5 minutes to throw that on, and I won't have to worry about that anymore. And then we'll get this throttle body done. Okay, so the high pressure line is going to be the one that goes from the pump down to the rack. So we'll pop this guy off real quick and get the new one put on. All right, so this is the adapter that I had to go from the pump to AN, and you can see it just used a copper crush washer, so I was never really a big fan of that. Whereas these adapters use an actual O-ring washer, so they should be a lot better. Shouldn't have any leaking issues with these. So the bigger one is going to go to the pump, and the smaller one will go to the rack. And then once you have the adapters in both the pump and down there in the rack, simply put the line on. Thinking the 90 degree is probably going to go up here. Let me play around with it and we'll see. Okay, so it almost seems like the line is maybe an inch or two too long, but if you route it like this, snake it down there, it works just fine. So hopefully that'll get rid of our power steering issues. So now let's start working on this throttle body.
One eternity later.
Holy shit, guys. I'm pretty sure I just figured out my issue. I'm like shaking right now. I'm so excited. So to make a long story short, the electronic throttle body didn't work. It turns out this is a non-VVTi throttle body. So this motor here is actually for traction control. So it's not actually an electronic throttle body, it's a cable one. But I had already gotten it installed. I made an adapter and I started wiring it up, connected all the wires to the ECU, and that's when I figured out it wasn't right because I couldn't find a pin out because it didn't have the right pins. Anyways, while I was messing with the ECU, I wanted to try something, which was to hook up the drive wire for the automatic ECU to make the car think that it was in drive. I originally had it just hooked up to park so that the car would start. But actually I think I should have done neutral instead of park. So I hooked up the neutral wire and the drive wire, and I just took it for a test drive. It didn't shut off. I hit rev limiter in first, second, and third, and man, the thing freaking rips now, so I'm pumped. So yeah, man, that was a huge surprise. I kind of just had this idea that maybe that would make a difference, but I was not faithful that it would. And somehow, by miracle, it freaking fixed the problem, at least so far. I've only done one test drive. We'll have to do a couple more. We'll take it to the next event and see what it does then. But, oh, I am so excited. I really thought I was going to have to buy a standalone ECU or a aftermarket throttle body or something. It was going to cost a bunch of money. But at the end of the day, all it was one, maybe two little wires. Freaking incredible. So yeah, now that the engine's working again, I've got to get the new handbrake lines put in. Since we broke those, I also want to try to get a clutch delay valve to try to save the axles. And there's a few other odds and ends that I want to get done on the car before the next event. So let's get started on all that stuff. I'm going to take a minute to calm down because like I said, I'm freaking pumped. Alright, so one of the highest priorities is going to be fixing the handbrake due to the drive shaft putting a hole in it. So when the diff bolt broke, the drive shaft moved up and caused the drive shaft to rub on the hose, and it just barely damaged it enough to make it leak, so the handbrake stopped working. So I'm still waiting on a new line to come in the mail, but in the meantime, while I'm under there working on the handbrake, I want to get the diff swapped out. So right now the car has a 391 diff in it. We've got a 315 to switch out with it. Because that Hawkeye Downs in third gear, well, second and third gear, I was just hitting rev limiter the whole time. So the 391 is a pretty short ratio. So if we switch to the 315, we'll get a lot longer gears, more wheel speed, and hopefully it'll be perfect for that track. We won't be hitting rev limiter, but there's a chance it might be too long and the car will bog and we'll have a hard time keeping the wheels spinning. But if that's the case, I can stick a boost controller in there and just turn up the boost, because right now we're only running 10 pounds and my plan is to run about 15 on the car. So anyways, we're gonna get that diff thrown in, fix the handbrake, and then move on to something else. Alright, so we got the 315 diff all mounted up. Piece of cake. I've changed the diff in this car probably 10 times. So hopefully that'll be a good gear ratio for the Hawkeye Downs track. Like I said, the other diff was just too short. Third gear, I was just hitting rev limiter on the bank, so hopefully this will be a lot better. The other thing I want to do is fix this shifter. So for whatever reason, it can slide up and down like an inch, which has made shifting super inconsistent. I don't know if it was supposed to be a press fit or what, but literally the rod attaches right here and the shifter can slide up and down this whole length. So to fix that, I'm just going to weld the rod to the monoball here. The monoball will still be able to turn inside of its own bearing, just the rod won't be able to turn inside of the monoball, and you won't be able to take the rod off the ball, but that's no big deal. You can still take the whole thing apart with this C-clip in here if you wanted to. But once it's together, we'll still be able to adjust it, so we should be able to adjust it however we want, and it should work perfectly then, hopefully. So I'm going to whip out the welder, get this thing welded together, and throw it back in. Alright, there we have it. Couple little tack welds should be all it takes to keep it from sliding up and down. So now I'm going to get a little bit of paint thrown on it. We'll get it thrown back in the car and get it adjusted until it shifts good. It's shifting like butter now. So hopefully that'll be a lot more consistent and I won't have problems shifting anymore. So yeah, we got that wrapped up. Now I've got another small project I want to do next, and this is actually something I meant to do before I ever went to the first drift event, but I totally forgot. And that would be installing toe straps. So I actually had an instance at the last event where the car died on me and I couldn't get it to restart, so I had to get towed off track. And there wasn't anywhere on the front of the car where they could get their tow hook to go through. So they had to pop the hood and attach it to the top of the radiator support and tow me off that way with the hood open, which was kind of sketchy. But yeah, I definitely need to get these tow straps installed so that if that were to happen again, I have a way for them to tow me off the track easily. So I already got the rear one installed. I just used the factory tow hook location. I actually took the hook and I cut it off and used the bolt, and then I ground off the head and made it square so that I could put a socket on it. And we got the strap in there. It sticks out a lot more than I want it to, but until we build a rear bash bar for this car, there's not really much I can do about that. The front one, on the other hand, is a different story. So this one, since I already have a bash bar, all I have to do is weld a little tab onto the bash bar to mount the hook to. And I'm thinking that I want to just cut a small slot right here in the bumper for the strap to come through, and then there's like probably a 3-inch gap between the bumper and the bash bar, so the strap won't stick out nearly as far. So I'm going to get the bumper cut real quick and then get an idea of where the mounting tab needs to go, and then we'll go from there. So I think the easiest way to cut a nice clean slot in the bumper is going to be to use a carbide burr and just make a nice line. So we'll start off with a little hole with the drill bit. And then we'll make our line. I didn't get it super straight, but I don't think you're going to notice once the strap's in there. Now to clean off all of these burrs, we'll just take a razor blade and cut those off. Alright, so we got the front strap done. I made sure to put a little gusset on the back side. Don't know if you can see it, but to give it strength so that it wouldn't just bend. So I'm going to throw the bumper on real quick. And there we go. Hopefully over time it'll kind of settle a little bit so that it hangs down like this instead of sticking out, but we'll see. And it'll probably look better when the bumper's painted. So now that that's done, I got my handbrake line in the mail, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw this on real quick, and then we've got one more project that I can think of that I wanna do before the next drift event. All right, so the next project is gonna be the exhaust. I had it way too low before, so it was just scraping all the time and tearing up V-band clamps. So the way I had done the downpipe, I essentially had this piece on there, so the V-band actually was underneath the car, which took away about 1 inch or so of ground clearance. Because to fit the V-band, you have to give room between the exhaust and the chassis, and then it also sticks below the exhaust. So overall, that adds a lot of diameter to the exhaust in that section, so it ended up really low. So what I'm going to do is I've cut this chunk off, and we're going to move the V-band up so that it's basically by the firewall. So instead of underneath the car, it'll be up by the firewall, and we should be able to get the exhaust tucked up a lot tighter. So I'm going to get this V-band welded to the downpipe and then throw it back in the car, and we just got to make a quick connection from the downpipe to the main exhaust.
One hour later.
All right, so we finally got the exhaust done. I had to do pie cuts to make it fit right, and pie cuts always take forever to weld, but we got it done, and it's fitting much better. So it probably sticks out, I don't know, maybe 2 inches below everything else. It's probably about 2 inches higher than it was before with the V-band down there. So hopefully we're not gonna scrape anymore. We're not gonna hit the exhaust on the ground every time we hit a bump. And with that done, we've pretty much wrapped up all the stuff that needed to be done before the next drift event. We got the handbrake lines fixed, got the new diff in, got the power steering line fixed, got toe straps on, and we even possibly fixed the shutting off issue. I still want to test drive it a couple more times just to confirm, but we're going to save that for the next one. So if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications when I post my next video. And yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Hope to see you on the next one. Peace out.